Welcome to the Massachusetts School of Law Educational Forum. Thank you for joining us. This program is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law and is shown nationwide. The topic for today's show is obesity. In a society that worships thin, a seemingly contradictory epidemic is growing. As the TV stars so many individuals seem to idolize, we watch them get thinner and thinner before our very eyes. Our country is experiencing a surge in levels of obesity that is reaching alarming proportions. Who and what is to blame for the disparity between the images that we worship and the ones that we ourselves show to the world? Has obesity reached epidemic proportions? Is it caused by gluttony? Is it lack of willpower? Or is its cause genetic or viral, or the result of eating processed foods? Is it likely that overweight kids will also be overweight adults? Joining me for the discussion, Dr. Allison E. Field is an assistant professor at Harvard Medical School and is an associate epidemiologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts. Her research focuses on the causes and the consequences of overweight, disordered eating among children and among women. She has written extensively on the topic. Dr. Fields, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me. Diana Cullum-Dugan is a clinical coordinator of the Nutrition and Weight Management Center at Boston Medical Center. She is the recipient of a number of honors, awards, and scholarships. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show. Dr. Caroline Abopian, and I'm sure I didn't say that right. How do you say that? Is Nutrition and Weight Management Center. She is the director. She is an associate professor of medicine at Boston University School of Medicine. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you for joining me. Dr. Stephen Prinz is the medical director at Linden Oaks Hospital in Illinois. He has served as the director of eating disorders. Dr. Prinz is a representative of ANAD. What does that stand for, doctor?
Welcome. It stands for anorexia nervosa and associated eating disorders.
Well, welcome to the show. Thank
you.
you for joining me today. And I'm Diane Sullivan, your host for today's program. Panel, let's talk about obesity. Why has the World Health Organization labeled obesity to be an epidemic of great proportions?
Well, it's the World Health Organization, as many other organizations, are very alarmed at the escalating rates of overweight and obesity in this country and around the world. Currently, 61% of Americans are considered overweight or obese.
61%?
A full 61%, so that's over half of the population.
Wow.
And the rest of the world is falling right behind us.
When we say somebody is obese, are they 10 pounds overweight? Are they 20, 40? What do you need to be obese?
Well, it's a little complicated now. We use the body mass index as a measure of body fat. So you're overweight if your body mass index, which is your height in meters squared over your your weight in kilograms over your height in meters squared. That's a tough number to calculate, but there are graphs now where you can calculate that. If your BMI is over 25, you're considered overweight, and if it's over 30, you're considered obese. But in general, it's about 10% over your ideal body weight would be overweight.
And who sets up what an ideal body weight should be? For example, and I probably don't want to know this answer, but I'm 5'6". What should I weigh?
Well, it's hard to say. Your range for a normal BMI would be between 18 and 22. Mm-hmm. So that could be probably anywhere from 125 all the way to 160.
Oh, wow. I'd like to know that I can go as high as 160 and not be obese.
It depends on many things.
It's been very controversial because the range is wide. It's between 18.5 and 25 is considered healthy. And the fact is we know that people, as they verge up towards the upper end of the healthy weight range, are at increased risk of diabetes and hypertension.
Sure.
So it would be a false sense of assurance to think, that's okay, I can gain 30 pounds and I'm still healthy.
I was going to say, I'm going to have a great dinner tonight.
Yeah, if you look at the curve of mortality with BMI, it starts going up at fairly low BMIs. Mm-hmm. And the risk for developing diabetes, even if your BMI is 22, which is perfect, if it goes up to 23, your risk of diabetes goes up a little bit.
It's interesting. The medical profession has switched gears now. You talk about BMI, but still the general consumer, I think we're thinking, what's the number on the scale? So as soon our people, consumers, going to think about BMI?
Well, there are a lot of places you can go on the web and you can just punch in your weight and tell them your height, and you can plot it that way. You can even download it to your Palm Pilot if you want. So on my Palm, I can just punch in someone's weight. The reason BMI it works a lot better than just weight is that if I tell you I weigh 120 pounds, it doesn't help me very much unless I know that someone is like 5'1" or 5'10".
Right.
And BMI takes that into account.
It doesn't take into account, though, if somebody's muscular or small-boned or any of those considerations, correct?
No, it
it's
does not.
actually inaccurate for someone who does a lot of strength training because their body weight is heavy compared to their height.
Right. So they'd be overweight but not over
They would-
fat.
right, they would be overweight but not over fat, exactly.
Which is really the more important consideration, isn't it?
Right. I mean, unfortunately, in the States, there are very, very few people who are active, so it's more of a theoretical concern than a real problem. But if people
really
did
doesn't-
become active,
It really doesn't affect that many people.
Right.
We're talking about elite athletes and bodybuilders whose BMIs are going to be high, yet they're going to be very fit.
Right. But particularly around the 25 range, I mean, there probably are people who are quite active, particularly males, who probably do look like they're overweight, but a clinician should be able to tell pretty quickly this is not really an issue. If someone is active on
Right.
a regular basis,
Right.
And you can see they don't have much body fat.
What we would do at our institution is our dietitian will calculate out what we would consider as ideal body weight, and in part there's a variable that she would calculate in. It looks at the bone structure, and so is someone larger bone structure or smaller bone structure, and so we sort of incorporate that, looking into ideal body weight. And as a general rule, at least what we're looking at is that we'd like someone to be within a bell-shaped curve of 95% of what the general population is. And there's insurance companies that have calculated out these figures. And if someone's really outside of the bell-shaped curve, they're at much greater risk at both ends, for medical complications.
Sure. Can obesity be fatal, Piano?
Wouldn't be listed as a cause of death, but it certainly would increase your risk from numerous diseases that might result in death.
Such as diabetes, arthritis,
Hypertension,
heart disease.
heart disease, postmenopausal breast cancer, stroke. I mean, there are many, many chronic diseases that are caused by obesity.
We see about 300,000 deaths a year related to obesity.
So they do track it to some degree.
Yes, you can track it to some degree. It's not always 100% that all heart disease is caused by obesity, but a good percentage of heart disease is caused by obesity. An even greater percentage of type 2 diabetes is caused by obesity.
Sure. Let's talk about the actual causes of obesity. Let's start here. How many people are obese because of gluttony or a lack of willpower? Is that a large percent of the obese population or a small percent, would you say?
I don't think anyone knows. I mean, by and large, people don't pinpoint one cause. It's multifactorial. I mean, there's so many different reasons that people eat or exercise or do not exercise. I don't think there's a popular misconception that people are obese and therefore they're lazy and they're slobs and lots of negative attributes, but there's really no data whatsoever to back that up.
Dr. Prinz, do you agree with that?
I think, yes, I do. I think that if we look at obesity, I think of it as a chronic medical kind of disorder, and there's really biopsychosocial contributors to the illness. And I think you need to look at all of those aspects.
Does the medical profession view obesity as a chronic health problem, as a medical condition?
Yes, they do. In fact, as Caroline was saying, is that really obesity is linked to numerous medical conditions, and so for us to not look at it as a medical condition would be a grave mistake.
I agree. I think that doctors and researchers definitely know it's a disease and can lead to death, can lead to other serious illnesses. The problem is that I don't think the rest of the country is behind us. The insurance companies, I don't mean to blame the insurance companies, but they haven't gotten to the stage where they're covering obesity treatment yet. I think that a lot of there are a lot of industries that is at play. The way we live day to day is at play, and the rest of the country really hasn't gotten there yet. I think, to be fair to people, 61% of Americans are overweight or obese, It's not their fault. It's not our fault. It's the fact that we're not doing a lot of physical activity. That's because we're working all day at sedentary jobs. There are not enough parks out there. There are not enough sidewalks. We don't have a society that bikes to work. We're not walking to work because it's dangerous. We have fast food restaurants on every corner. Yes, we're eating less fat, but we're eating a lot more calories. So maybe a small percentage is due to gluttony and just overeating, but the people who are overeating because society is telling us to overeat. We're being inundated with TV commercials. We go to restaurants and their portions are huge. You know, people in Europe is really behind us in that. Europeans are still come to the United States and are shocked at the portions of food that we're eating. So I think a lot of things are coming into play just now that are creating this epidemic, and I think we've got to get away from blaming the patient, blaming the person who's overweight, that it's willpower and they can do something about it.
Well, you brought up something interesting. You're talking about some of our eating habits and the fact that we're all busy and aren't exercising as much as we should. But when I was prepping for this show, I read somewhere that on any given day, 7% of Americans eat at McDonald's. I mean, I'm shocked by that.
Fast food, it's a huge industry. It's enormous. Many people, you have couples who both people work. There's no time, they're not preparing food at home. And the fast food industry has been brilliant in their marketing. I mean, they know where to put restaurants so that people pass right by them. It's an easy option. Brilliant marketing. And there's a book written on this exact topic, Fast Food Nation, and it's
Well,
really sort
I'll
of
tell you a
fascinating.
personal story. I mean, I'm not the typical person in that I'm a weightlifter and I'm a serious strength trainer and I'm a runner. So I eat, you talk about large portions, and the portions seem never large enough for me. But I had to recently make a trip to West Virginia in the car. And so, because it's such a long drive, I never eat at McDonald's or fast food restaurants. And so we'd stopped at McDonald's and Wendy's and all of these along the way, and I came home and I was gone 30 hours and I gained 6 pounds. How is that possible? 6 pounds. I said, what if I ate like this all the time? I'd weigh 300 pounds, there's no doubt about it.
The serving sizes are absolutely enormous, and they do package value meals, which are the cheapest, calories imaginable. And it's a huge problem, particularly in the inner city, when there are not many options around for eating healthier food or eating fresh fruits and vegetables. And if you're tight on your money and there's a value meal, that's going to look like a very attractive option.
And the funny thing for me is I'm a vegetarian, so I wasn't even eating the hamburgers, and I gained 6 pounds in 30 hours.
With the fries and the sodas have become enormous. Serving sizes are huge. They're empty calories. There's absolutely nothing beneficial in there. And they're enormous. You see them at the malls, you see them in the movie theaters, you see them at fast food restaurants.
So one thing that our audience should take away from this show is to consider when they eat out, where they're eating and what they're eating, because this probably plays a great part. The prepared foods, I would think that's a major problem for today's society.
Exactly. There's several terms for it. We call it toxic food environment, but I've heard obesogenic environment, just mainly saying the manufacturers, the food industry has made it extremely convenient for us to get large portions of very tasty food that has very low nutritional value to it. But it's easy, it's fast. We live, both parents work, we have kids in sports, we're running to and from drive-ins, breakfast on the road. I believe there are even, over the next 10 years, I believe, there are 25,000 McDonald's already planned. One will be in a church, so that the people who are in church a lot can feed their children breakfast and lunch. So it's very difficult, if you do want to eat healthy, like Allison was saying, to find it.
Oh, sure, that's right. Let me ask you a question. You brought up something, and it makes me wonder. The food industry, are they a strong lobby so that we only get certain information or information is given to us in the most colorful light?
Absolutely. I think it's all packaged. One of the big soda manufacturers, actually, this is sort of paraphrasing what I heard at a conference recently, their dilemma right now is they want to make they've subliminally over the last 20, 25 years made the serving size of a Coke at a fast food restaurant bigger, so that now we expect that big size, and the next size is a 1 liter Coke, but they can't make a paper cup that's strong enough to hold that much liquid for a period of time, so they have engineers on the payroll 24/7 to develop this cup.
Wow. But on the other side of the coin, until, and I don't know how long ago it was, maybe 10 years ago, that they had to put the suggested serving size on the label. I'd want to have spaghetti. George would want to have spaghetti. And so if we're both going to have spaghetti, okay, we'd make 2 boxes. We each have our box of spaghetti. And then all of a sudden, when serving size came out, and I said, serving size for 8. I've been, I've been eating serving size for 8. I mean, what is a serving size for 1? 7 strands of spaghetti? So, I mean.
That serving size for 8, that box of spaghetti, the whole box, is
Yeah.
worth 1,600 calories, which could be someone's daily caloric needs for a day.
Good thing I run a lot, isn't it?
And with the fast food, I mean, those value meals are just
They're
a
even
whopping
worse.
calorie
They're
load.
even worse. 2,000 calories for one,
Easy.
Easily,
one
right.
burger.
Easily. Your day's calories in one meal.
And many people will eat, fast food numerous times during the week.
Breakfast is a big fast food item, muffins and a cup of coffee, and the muffins have 500 to 600 calories each, with at least 30,
half of that.
at least 30 grams of fat.
Right. And the unhealthy varieties of fat, right?
Do you think the average member of the public knows this, or no,
Absolutely
they don't?
not.
No,
They have no idea.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to educate the public and get the nutrition facts out there, because
Sure.
I think part of the population will stop doing that if they know, gee, I'm packing in 500 calories this one muffin, and pick something, like an English muffin or a piece of toast or something else to eat. The problem is that it's so well packaged, and you can drive in
Yeah.
to the local donut place and get your muffin and cup of coffee with cream. The other interesting thing that people really don't realize is all the coffee shops that have all the new coffee places, Starbucks and
Right.
whatnot. If you fill your coffee mug, if you get that grande coffee and you fill it with cream, and you have a cup of coffee every day, that's worth 7,000 calories a month.
7,000
calories
calories
a
a month.
I don't think people realize
I'm sure they don't.
how many calories they're actually getting. And that's just coffee.
That's 2
But
pounds.
I think we all know that, quote, donuts are bad for you. But yet, in the morning, you see, as you go by every donut shop, the lines.
It's convenient, and they've been brilliant in marketing. The problem is the healthier options, people are not marketing the same way, and they're not as cheap.
You don't
There's
see
not the profit
you don't
margin.
see marketing for fruits and vegetables.
Right. And they're not as filling. I mean, we need to find some solution that's going to be easy for people to pick up, nice packaging, it's colorful, you can market it to kids and they'll like it, and it's healthy, and it has not come along.
And let's face it, fat tastes good.
Right, no, it's true. It's, they, do a lot of research on what is palatable, what's going to make people come back.
Sure. Let's switch gears just a little bit. Can obesity be genetic? Is there a genetic propensity to be obese?
Yes, I think there is a part of the variation in BMI that is genetically programmed. We usually say about between 30 and 60% of obesity is genetic.
I would say it'd be lower than that, simply because the number of people have increased so rapidly. I mean, there may be
Yeah.
people who have the genes that they will have to fight it harder.
Right.
But
It has nothing to do with the prevalence going up. You're right. But I think we've evolved over the eons of years. We've evolved genes to promote fat storage because that's survival of the fittest. The people who can survive on, eons ago when there was food available at certain times and no food at other times, people who survived were the ones who could store energy more efficiently and use it more efficiently. And that's how we've evolved. But now, with the environment being for energy conservation, we don't need that energy storage gene anymore. We've got plenty of calories. We're not doing the heavy exercise that we used to way back in those days, and so we've become obese. Having said that, the environment plays a huge role. I think it's the environment that has caused the obesity epidemic, because that's occurred over the past 20 years, and genes don't work that fast.
I mean, there's small groups of people who they do have obesity. It's completely related
Yeah.
to their genes, but that's a very small percentage.
Yeah.
And I do agree with Caroline. I mean, there are people who may have a propensity to obesity. You put them in the right environment, or in this case, the wrong environment, and they get very large.
Sure. Let me ask you this, and it's a scientific question. How does the brain know that one is full or one is hungry? How does that process work? I mean, I've heard things through the years like, You should eat your meal and wait a half hour because it takes that long for the signal to get to your brain that you're full. Is that accurate, or is that a wives' tale?
I don't know what to say about that. There's still so much about satiety that we don't know. We're starting to learn. In 1995, researchers discovered leptin, and I think most of the public knows about leptin now. It's a protein that's secreted from the fat cell, and it goes to the brain, and it helps you feel full. It goes into your hypothalamus, and hooks onto the receptor, and you feel full. We've learned through research that leptin protects our fat mass, so that apparently anytime we try to lose weight, leptin levels go down, and we get hungrier because leptin levels go down, and then we want to eat more to get back the fat that we've lost. So what's genetic about that is that it's genetically programmed when and how leptin works in each person. So each person has sort of a set point of fat volume. And anytime you want to get away from that set point, leptin levels change.
What sets that set point?
Well, that's what's genetic.
Okay.
That's probably, that has a lot to do with genetics. It's not that you can't change your set point, but that's the part that's tough, because researchers have found that when you lose weight, not only the leptin levels change, but your other sympathomimetic system changes as well. And your body metabolism changes, your resting metabolic rate changes. As you lose weight, it goes down, so that you're trying to conserve energy.
Sure.
And then when you gain weight, it goes up to try and get rid of the energy. So your body likes to be at a certain weight, and part of that is genetically determined.
Some researchers have recently hypothesized that obesity could be caused by a virus. Do you think there's any credibility to that?
Once again, we've seen such a rapid increase in the number of people who are overweight. I really think it's an environmental determinant.
It's interesting. I mean, definitely there's I think a genetic component to illness, and as we find out our genome, which we now are starting to look at the human genome, we're going to really have discoveries of all these illnesses to some degree. I agree completely that there's a huge environmental role, but we're finding even with anorexia as well as with obesity, there are some links to perhaps some infections. And even we don't know with cancer, is there some link, with viruses and infections. There's a common cold virus, an adenovirus, that at least there's been some association that it may be linked somewhat to obesity. What we see with anorexia, for instance, is that some younger patients may have strep infections, and sometimes there's a follow of anorexia developing after the strep infection. Whether or not there's really an etiology to it, we don't know. But it is interesting, that's at least I think something, that there may be a small genetic population that if they're exposed to this virus, it may alter, some of their genetic material perhaps, and somehow, kick in the illness. So.
I sometimes think that we hope it's a virus because then we'll be close to a cure, which leads me to my next question. Do you think in our lifetimes we're going to see a cure for obesity? Will we be able to take the pill along with our vitamin pill and no longer be obese?
I really doubt it. I mean, I think the problem is we need to change our lifestyle, and that's what the problem is. People go on a diet, which does imply you're going to go off the diet at some point in time. They don't really talk about making changes they can live with and stick with them. I mean, it's not an inoculation. If you lose weight, you're not inoculated against ever gaining it back.
Shucks.
Yeah, I know. Too bad, isn't it? Sorry. It's so disappointing.
I think, too, we need to approach a little bit differently, because I don't think the toxic food environment is going away. So what we do in our clinic, we work with our patients on how to build their skill power, how to handle the situations when they come up, because willpower is not going to last. And all the food chains out there are going to be there, and all the parties and the holidays and the birthday parties and that kind of, they're always going to be there. And changing how they perceive what they see and getting them more physically active.
Which 30 minutes of some type of cardiovascular exercise on most days would really cure the problem, wouldn't it, for a lot of people?
I don't know if it would really cure it. I think it would certainly help it.
It would lower disease risk as well. Even if you didn't lose enough weight, you'd lower your risk for diabetes and hypertension
Yes.
pretty dramatically.
Yes.
I think we're going to really need a massive public health effort. I'm very extreme about this. I think we're going to need an effort, much as has been given to smoking. The
Well,
smoking
certainly, obesity is the second largest cause of preventable death. So why
It's
not?
starting to become the first.
Is
It's
it
starting
really?
to, yeah. Since
Wow.
tobacco smoking is now going down, it's starting to overtake even tobacco smoke as the #1 preventable cause of death in the United States.
Well,
Really.
if that's the case, then why not mount a national campaign similar to that to stamp out cigarette smoking? Why don't we do
It's
it?
been so much more complicated. Unlike cigarette smoking, which is one thing. I mean, we're still arguing about what causes obesity, and we can't market a campaign unless we figure out what we're targeting, and it needs to be pretty specific.
Okay,
I think
so-
activity, though, would be a great
Right,
thing, because we know it certainly can't hurt, and it lowers your risk for disease. Even if you don't change your weight very much, you're lowering your risk for disease. Probably a lot of school teachers would love to have the kids getting their activity outside the classroom. I mean, there are a lot of benefits.
Well, in the second half of the show, I do want to focus in on kids because I think the lack of phys ed classes now in the schools combined with video games and the propensity to watch TV is part of the explanation why the obesity rate in kids has doubled in the past 10 years. I mean, that's a big
right.
concern.
It's a huge concern, because if they're overweight now, they will probably be overweight as adults.
Well, is it true that if a child is overweight by the age of 8, that they're likely to be overweight as an adult? Is that the key?
Certainly by adolescence, as they head into adolescence, they're very likely to be overweight. And we don't know how much of that is because their behaviors have already been molded, or it's the weight per se, but it's an alarming problem, and it's been seen by numerous researchers.
We need to take a break for a couple of public service announcements, so I'm going to ask you to stay seated, panel, and to our viewing audience. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned.
Morgan! Come on! Yeah, Morgan here. So, hi. Right now? Okay. The eensy-weensy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Out came the sun and dried up all the rain. And the eensy-weensy spider climbed up the spout again.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, sweetheart.
Family. Isn't it about time?
What can I say? It's my girl.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
You know how inquisitive kids are. That's why you store sharp objects in a safe place. Keep medicines out of reach. And if you have a gun, you keep it unloaded and locked away. As concerned members of the television community, we urge you to be just as careful with television. Kids don't always know what they're watching. That's why you should.
Kids aren't afraid of other kids. Or people with different color skin. That's because kids know there are other things. Worse things. Bigger things to be afraid of. Like monsters from outer space! Remember, friends come in all colors.
Welcome back to the Educational Forum, where we're discussing obesity in this country. Panel, what role does poverty play in the propensity for one to be obese? It used to be that the rich and the contented were fat, and then the poor were thin, and there seems to be a reversal of that trend today. What role does poverty play?
Well, we certainly used to see that people simply didn't have the resources to be buying adequate amounts of food, and we don't really have that as much in the U.S. because there are places such as fast food that's very cheap. And unfortunately, particularly in very impoverished areas, there's a lot of fast food and very few other options. And if you need to watch how far your money goes, a lot of the very calorie-dense foods are going to look very attractive. And I do think that's one reason we see a very strong relationship between poverty and obesity.
So it's expensive to eat healthy.
Well, it doesn't need to be, but there are not as many other options. It is more expensive than fast food. Fast food is extremely cheap. I mean, you really can, feed people for very little money. If you're going to go out and you're going to buy particularly fresh fruits and vegetables, they are more expensive. There's no two ways about it.
Well, what about a mother who is raising a family? She's a single parent, and so she's working. What about frozen foods? What about canned foods? Are they much higher in fat, and do they contribute to the problem of obesity?
Actually, I think some of what we would call the poor man's diet is actually healthier. It's not what they're eating right now, but dried beans, legumes are not that expensive. Rice is not that expensive if kept to the portion sizes, is a very healthy food. And encouraging buying fruits and vegetables in season, they're a lot cheaper if you buy them in season. If you buy the summer fruits in winter, you're going to pay a lot of money. But by and large, you can feed a family of 4 on very little, very healthy, as long as you stay away from the processed foods. That's what costs more. The Lunchables cost more than a package of lunch made in a whole loaf of bread.
Diana, give our audience, if you would, some ideas on inexpensive, healthful eating. And I think you've done some of that. Beans.
I think fresh meats. There are certain, if you buy on sale, you can buy chicken on sale usually once a week. Every week there's a certain protein food that's on sale. Legumes are cheap. Fresh vegetables in season are cheap. Make a big pot of soup, big pot of stew. Casseroles can be cheap. I think it gets back to buying whole, unprocessed foods and cooking it, and not buying the processed packages, the Velveeta shells and cheese, and these things that are high in fat, they're high in sodium, they don't have a lot of nutritional value.
So what advice do you have for the mother or the mother and father that have a few kids? They work full time, then they take the kids to soccer and hockey practices, and they're getting in at 6:30 at night on a good day, might be 8 o'clock at night, and now they want to have healthy eating.
Plan. That's it. It always comes back to planning. You can always find an hour to an hour and a half in your week to sit down, look at what menu you want to have for the following week, write your grocery list from that menu, and take the time to go to the store. Many times I recommend preparing 2 or 3 main dishes on a Sunday afternoon, and have that ready in your fridge to go. If you're prepared and you're planned for, when you come home at 6:30 and you're starving, you're not going to have that propensity to go by the fast food place or pick something up or have pizza delivered. It's already there. All I have to do is heat it up.
Of course, I would have to struggle with the issue not to eat it all on Sunday evening. Get a little padlock for the refrigerator, right? With someone else having the combination. Why do you believe the incidences of obesity are just raising so rapidly all of a sudden? I mean, it's the headlines.
Well, I think as we've all said, that's not genetics. Genes don't work that quickly. What's happening is that we're all eating too many calories, and I think we've mentioned that America over the past 30 years, Americans are eating less fat. That is true. We are.
It has dropped, hasn't it, from 40% down to 30%
Right.
of total caloric intake?
Right. So, but the prevalence of obesity is still on the rise, and it doesn't look like it's even going to plateau. So what's going on? I think we're eating too many calories.
Well, because we're burning off fewer. I mean, it's a
we're
bad
burning off-
combination.
Yeah,
right?
it's a very bad combination. So our physical activity keeps going down. I mean, schools have gotten rid of their PE during the day. When I was a kid, we had PE for an hour.
Every day?
Every day.
Right, and it's a problem too, because if both parents work and there's no one to either push the kids outside to play, or you're worried about the kids being outside playing because there's some safety issues, that's something that we really need to work on.
Now,
and we need to have after-school programs so that they can either be mandatory so kids would be active, or the parents wouldn't need to worry
that's
about
where
policing.
I think we need a public health effort. We're at Boston Medical Center. We see an indigent population. All those kids, mothers are happy when their kids stay inside and watch TV because they know where they are.
So they can call from work and check
So
on
they
them.
know they're not outside getting, killed or into
It
big
is
trouble.
They say the average person watches about 4 hours of TV a day. And if
4 hours a day?
Yeah, if
I hope they're watching this show
That's
during
right,
those
that's
4
right.
hours.
Children are.
Children
And
do.
you
That
know,
adds up to
that-
57 days out of a year. 57 days straight days out of a year is devoted to television watching.
if you could, I mean, when we're talking, you know, I mean, we're really talking about education and pushing people with awareness and helping them make healthier choices. I have someone I assessed just last week. He came in for depression, and he was obese. And I'm just doing a little history, and he drinks 10 regular Mountain Dew sodas a day, and he doesn't. He goes, I don't drink. I don't understand what's that. You add up the 180 or 220 calories of these 10 sodas a day, and he's getting
That's
over
2,000 calories.
Yeah,
for
it's just
10 for 10
unbelievable.
They're
And
all
so
like the cues to eat while you're watching TV.
Right.
Exactly.
If we could convert some of that time, you know, you commented, you know, when you gained the weight on your little trip and you were sedentary for 30 hours or so. I mean, the reality is if we could convert some of our sedentary time, like our TV time, you know, to some physical form of activity, even if it's, you know, walking around the house, and you know, we're actually going to help a great deal. To my knowledge, what actually helps maintain someone's weight, and realistically, you know, we get this genetic sort of set point weight, and we can't really alter that all too much because our body, as Caroline said, is going to fight physiologically very hard to try and maintain our set point weight. But if we could get the one factor that actually helps people at least maintain a healthier weight is exercise. If we look at, you know, data over time with all these weight programs, and what we'll see if someone actually has most success, you look at part of their formula, it's really they're maintaining some form of physical activity throughout the time frame, throughout the 5 years. It's not that it may not help initially because we may build body mass and muscle, and we may not lose that weight, but really overall, if someone's going to have some success, they have to be active, physically active.
Consistency with respect to physical activity certainly will help the problem.
Even decreasing inactivity is really important because everyone has the concept that they have to increase their physical activity. But decreasing inactivity helps just as well, meaning
Stopping less TV.
less TV, those types of entertainments that don't cause any physical activity, walking more as a mode of transportation. In Colorado, they're implementing a really nice program, Jim Hill and his group out there, called the 10,000 Step Program, and every child in Colorado will get a pedometer. And they're encouraged to calculate the number of steps that they currently do per day, averaged over a week or two, and then add 500 a day to that until they're at 10,000 steps a day. So that will encourage a little bit of this sedentary television watching.
Pedometers, that's a great tool. They only cost about $20. People wear them and get really excited about how many steps they do. It records how many steps you do a day. And it's really hard to get to 10,000 in the United States because we're very sedentary. But you know, most people can do maybe 5,000. So you just increase by a little bit and people get competitive about it. And I think that's the kind of behavior modification, that's the kind of a tool that we need to get people moving.
It's a very tangible tool to measure because I might tell you to park in the furthest parking spot.
Sure.
When you see how many steps that adds to your pedometer, it actually gives you, well, that's why that was just 56 steps that I just got up toward my 10,000.
And now what we need is some gadget that will say, okay, at the end of the day, because you've increased this much, this is what you can eat and not gain weight.
Well, they have those. They have those.
Oh,
they
do
calculate.
they really?
Yes, they calculate your calories as well.
Let's talk a little bit about kids. Past 10 years, obesity rate in kids has doubled. Anything other than what we've talked about that you can point your finger to say that's a cause or that's a real problem today?
I mean, we've become increasingly sedentary, but it's not just in the U.S. I mean, we see pediatric obesity in China and other countries where it was never an issue before. I mean, it really is a global problem.
And in other countries, do you think the proliferation of televisions, computers, and video games is a cause there as well as here?
I think that's also, we don't have jobs that require us to be active, and we need to build activity into the day.
Now, what about the fact, we talked a little bit about this, but what about the fact that it seems that the American public school systems have decided that scores are important and physical activity is not? How do we change that? Can we change it?
Well, that's where I think the public health government needs to be involved. I think we need to get physical education into the school system, but we also need to do something about school lunches and the fact that there's a candy machine.
Oh, sure.
sometimes in every hall in the schools, soda machines. We need to remove those items, especially from the elementary schools.
Right. I mean, there are contracts with fast food industries and with soda companies, and they actually want, the soda companies want to have their banners there. They want to have name recognition. They want to capture the market when they're young. And this, I agree with Caroline, is a huge problem.
Well, they give the school money too.
Right, and that's what we're up
They enter
against.
contracts that we will sell this many bottles of soda, and they will, in return, get a certain amount of
You can
money
buy
for the
soda
school.
now in school?
Oh, yeah.
Honestly.
And they're even encouraging some teachers to ask their children to drink the sodas in class, whereas before it's been banned, you couldn't do that. But
Sure.
a couple of schools in particular
Wow.
weren't making their quota.
When I was a kid growing up, we used to have a nurse that would come into the school on certain days, and we tried to figure out when they were. And she would actually go in and inspect our lunch boxes. We all brought our lunches to school. And if it wasn't a proper, healthful diet, she would call home, or a note would go home. And I was a vegetarian, and it was always a problem. I didn't like sandwiches, so my mother would give me peanut butter and jelly crackers, and it would be a big problem with Mrs. D. She'd send home letters to my mother and this and that and all these threats, and my mother would say, just put the sandwich in your lunchbox. You don't have to eat it. And I'd say, no, I wasn't going to do that. Are there equivalents, Mrs. D's coming into schools today and
I
checking?
don't think so.
Mrs. D's gone.
Long gone, long gone.
In the school, it's interesting, in the school district that my kids belong to, there's starting to be some more health conscious ideas, and really what they're doing now, which is unusual, but what they're doing now is that the teachers actually are sending back whatever the child did not eat in their lunchbox and in their bag, and just to let the parent be aware of this is really what your child's eating. Not necessarily, that we want to eat more healthily, but just, that's like a little step in raising at least conscious awareness of what the kids are eating. So they'll eat the bag of Cheetos and they won't eat the sandwich, or they'll eat the cupcake. Or it's interesting in some of the sporting activities for kids. Some of these high advertisers, like Pepsi, for instance, they'll actually give coaches a cooler that says Pepsi on it, and they'll give the coaches little promotion items from the company. And the idea is that if you're at the game and you bring the cooler, and if a representative from Pepsi comes out to the game and sees you using their products, you get more promotional items for free. So we're talking about the big push, and you get the mindset, oh wow, you get this free product, which our society's like, wow, something for free, let's take advantage of it.
But the food industry is not going away, and the prepared food industry, the soda industry is not going away. So I think what we have to do, and I think again we need the government to help us, is to contract with the companies to promote the healthy side of what they sell.
Right.
Because Coca-Cola has bottled water that is very healthy, and I think that they're going to sell Coke, but they can also sell
Push the water.
the water
Sure.
and have
Advertising.
health promotions with their healthy products, much like General Mills has healthy cereals as well as sugar-coated cereals. And
I still think we shouldn't be having marketing campaigns going on in the school. I really feel pretty strong. Why they're in there is not because they're interested in the children. They want to capture their audience. And if we got Joe Camel sort of off the screen, I don't think we should be supplanting it by saying, okay, Coke isn't obviously as bad for you as cigarettes, but it's going to be a brand that kids are going to recognize at a very young age.
It's a part of the problem, too, that it seems to me that lots of people that are overweight don't eat breakfast. And I bet you lots of kids go to school not eating breakfast. Is there any correlation between the lack of eating a good breakfast and obesity?
I don't know many people who've looked at it.
I think there have been some studies.
I think in the adults, in adults there have been studies,
On breakfast.
small studies where, this is of course studies sponsored by breakfast cereal companies, but that's okay, showing that if you eat breakfast, you have you have less of a risk of developing obesity.
But most of the obesity, I mean, there are stats like that, but I think you need to back up earlier in life because there are very few people who have had absolutely no weight problems whatsoever until adulthood. I mean, people, they start picking up weight, a little too much, a little too much. And I guess the real question is, what were they doing before they started gaining the weight? Because otherwise it could be they are not eating breakfast because they're trying to lose weight and they're eating one less meal, and we know that weight loss is your best predictor of weight gain.
Right.
What we do believe is that at least if you could get like the metabolic part of the body functioning throughout the day, what we'll often do is promote, which I know is not realistic in a lot of people's jobs, but we'll promote trying to eat 6 times a day, looking at the caloric amount you need in a 24-hour period, but eat 6 times a day with the idea that you're really making the engine, so to speak, the body run more effectively and burn off calories more effectively instead of this eating one large meal, kind of
At night.
idea.
When you're going to then lie on the couch and watch TV and not burn it off.
And then it's a vicious cycle.
Sure.
Our patients come in, I would think more than half of our obese patients come in, tell us they don't eat anything all day, or
night.
at least no breakfast. And then, of course, by the time some people aren't hungry at breakfast because they eat late at night.
Right.
And so they don't eat breakfast. Sometimes they'll skip lunch. By the time 3 and 4 o'clock comes around, you're starving.
I can't imagine.
Come home from work, and the tendency is to overeat at that point.
Sure.
Or to eat all night long while watching TV. And then what happens the next day? The next morning you wake up and you're still full.
You're full.
So you do the same thing all over again. And that's going to predispose you to keep overeating at night. And that's where a lot of people gain weight.
Let's talk about some of the costs of obesity. When I was preparing for the show, I took a look at one study that had been done that tallied up the costs of inactivity, and it exceeded $24 billion in the country. Certainly the costs of obesity, medical, social, emotional, have to be great.
They are.
Right.
Do insurance companies look at this, and are they trying to do anything about it?
They traditionally have not, because insurance companies have traditionally focused on what's gonna save them money a few years down the road, not 20
Not
years
long-term.
down the road. And obesity prevention is going to save the country money 20 years from now, not now. So that's the essential problem that we're facing. A public health effort is we're going to see the results long term.
Sure.
And not now.
I agree with that. I think, though, that what is helpful, at least, what we're starting to do, for instance, with psychiatric illnesses, is look at the cost of the illness and how it affects, for instance, tardiness to work, days that people have missed work. And if we could look at obesity and all the health-related concerns and actually show an employee or show, with the education insurance company that this person is going to the emergency room or seeing their primary care physician much more than the person that doesn't have the obesity, and could we start to look at as, part of like a national kind of campaign education, could we start to show that in the immediacy this last year we lost this amount of money at employment because we didn't have our people working. And I think we need to hit that kind of data, the here and now kind of data, to really make some impact, even though, you're right, we need to look at the gains in the long run.
Yes, you're right. Do kids model their eating after their parents? Is that an accurate statement?
Some of the unhealthy behaviors, I've looked at some research, I've done some on my own, and do find that if the parents are very concerned with their weight or making comments about weight, that is picked up by their children.
It is.
So on the negative side, I haven't seen as much on the positive side.
How do we get kids to eat healthier?
Well, I do think modeling at home is an important way to go, but I think we need to experiment and find foods that they like. If they don't like a certain type of vegetable, don't make them eat that vegetable, but try different ways of preparing it in different vegetables and try experimenting. But you probably have a lot more, just to say on the topic.
I really think it is modeling after the parents. I think parents can set a good example by eating at least three healthy meals a day, eating breakfast, sending their child to school with a healthy lunch. When I was a kid, my mother always gave me a healthy lunch, and sometimes I traded my roast beef sandwich for, peanut butter and jelly, but that stayed in my head. And later on, I developed good eating habits because of what I saw my parents doing.
Sure.
So I think that's very important. Most parents today aren't home half the time, and as we said, are taking kids to fast food restaurants because it's easier and more convenient and cheap.
Sure.
So that's what's causing this problem, and now we're seeing obesity in children. 14 and 15% of kids are now overweight or obese in this country, and right behind that is a scary increase in the prevalence of type 2 diabetes in children. We never saw type 2 diabetes in children before.
I think another, back to the manufacturers on this and getting kids to eat healthy, I think is marketing. The new soft and chewy granola bar, I'm not sure who the maker is, and their ad campaign is, you can't shut your kids up, let them have one of these to chew on. So not only now are we having them watch TV, we're poking something in their mouths to get them to hush, where we could poke something healthy in mouth
Sure.
instead of something that was more candy-like.
Right. Different topic. People seem to be desperate to lose weight. I read that we waste like $5 billion a year on fraudulent weight loss campaigns. Do you think that things like stomach stapling, some of these new either gimmicks or pills that they have on the market are effective for people to use?
I think surgery, if you're extremely overweight or obese, that's one issue, but there are many people out there who are maybe 10, 15, 20 pounds overweight, and certainly surgery would not be an option for them.
Yeah, I think we ought to separate the gimmicks from surgery. Surgery is an up and coming field. It is now a very viable option for the severely obese.
Because there's no other option for them.
It's the only cure for severe obesity that we know.
The morbid obese.
For the morbid
You
obese.
can't lose that kind of weight through
No,
dieting.
and we're talking about people who weigh 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 pounds. That kind of obesity.
40%
Yeah.
or more the BMI.
And those patients with the right surgeon, an experienced surgeon, will lose 100 pounds and more the first year after surgery. So that's a very reasonable option for those patients.
So for the real obese, we should not dismiss some of the new surgical techniques that are on
Absolutely
the
not.
market.
Right.
Now, what about you walk into any drugstore and you see the whole aisle of all these, diet aids? What is your opinion on those?
Oh, it's a gimmick. I mean, this is 61% of our country is overweight or obese. That's a lot of money to be made. And anytime everyone wants to lose weight, they're looking for a magic pill, a magic drink, anything to get the weight off. They're desperate. They're going to spend a lot of money trying a lot of things.
But they don't much work, right? It's much easier
Exactly,
to take a couple of pills a day than it is to change your lifestyle.
Now,
And they don't work.
at best, these pills will cost a lot of money, make somebody rich, and do nothing for the person.
Exactly.
Do they
worst.
speed up
They-
metabolisms?
They temporarily, I mean,
Well,
we've
the
seen patients
caffeine,
that temporarily may lose weight, but if you really look at what happens, they go back to their baseline weight.
And they don't change their eating habits.
Right, they don't change the ideology of,
but
I think what really needs to happen, I know it sounds like too black and white, but we need to, the basics is we need to watch our intake, we need to increase our inactivity or increase our activity, and in the long run, that's the formula that's going to help the most as far as maintaining, some weight
An
loss.
ideal body.
Right, and most people can't sustain more than 10% their ideal, below their ideal body weight. We have these pictures of, the Barbie doll models. We're not going to get there. Our genetics are not going to allow us to get there. We're sort of fooling ourselves when we, try and get that image.
No, we have to rethink the ideal body weight. There is no such thing, and people who are overweight or obese, even if they only lose 5 or 10% of their initial body weight, decrease their risk of disease by 20%.
Wow.
So that's a big savings.
So it's a real incentive to lose weight.
Absolutely, it's a big incentive.
Even
And
with
the
the
quality
5
of
to
life will increase dramatically. You'll be able to walk up the stairs without being winded. You can pick up your grandchildren. You can do numerous things. And I think you need to focus on those because many people are very frustrated. They want to look very slim and they're just simply not
But
gonna
there's
get it.
a scary thing about the over-the-counter, since we're talking about those, and that's that they're really not, there's no one overlooking, like the FDA overlooks all our prescription drugs. No one's doing that for the over-the-counters.
Is that why we had a drug like fen that
Well,
kills people.
fen-phen's a different issue. Fen-phen, the combination, they were both prescription drugs. The FDA did not mandate the combination to be taken together, and the
Okay.
combination was caused the valvular problems in the heart.
They were not over-the-counter drugs.
They were not over-the-counter drugs. No,
But you're
that's
thinking of
good to hear.
ephedra or things like that.
right. But some of the over-the-counters, Herbalife and Metabolife, they have what's called ma wang in them, which is an herb. It's like ephedrine, and when taken inappropriately, can cause arrhythmia and death, and it has caused several deaths in this country. So.
We're out of time. I'm sorry, panel, but come back and join me again real soon. Thank you. You've been a delightful panel. To our viewing audience, until next time, be well. Thanks for joining us.
Here, Kitty.
Before you know it, she talks. Before you know it, she walks. Before you know it, she knows you. Before you know it, she has a heart. Before you know you're pregnant, when your baby's no bigger than a grain of rice. Before she's a twinkle in your eye, that's when you need to take folic acid every day. After that, it's too late to prevent some serious birth defects. Folic acid now, before you know it.
What inspired David to spend a lifetime exploring distant planets?
Star Trek.
What inspired Nicole to bring new life into the world?
The first time I saw St. Elsewhere.
And what inspired Stephen to risk his life for others?
Hill Street Blues.
Television. Who will it inspire next?
Hey, Brianna, what was that math assignment?
Hello?
Hi, honey. What are you doing?
Doing homework with my friends. Aren't I supposed to?
Just called to say hi, that's all.
Hi? That's all?
Yep.
Dad, that's so cool.
But hey, coolness runs in our family.
Well, I was thinking that I need my allowance a little early.
What a coincidence. I need someone to clean the garage for me.
Really?
Family.
I'll see you tonight, Dad.
Isn't it about time?
I love you.
I love you too, Dad.
From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
You know, I was there when Dr. King shared his dream with the world.
I have a dream today.
And I was there when we launched men to the moon.
Lift off.
I was even there when Mark McGuire broke the home run record. Yep, I've seen a lot in my day. Thanks to television, of course.
Dad, where are you going?
I'm gonna play a little golf.
Why?
Because it's Saturday, and that's the day that Dad plays golf.
Why?
Because I really like golf.
But why?
Well, good question. Because most of the time I just spend the day chasing a little white ball around the course.
Why?
Well, usually it's because I hit the ball into the rough or out of bounds.
Why?
I don't know. Sometimes I wonder why I even took up this game. Maybe I'll cut back a little.
Why?
Well, for starters, maybe I could spend a few more Saturdays doing something with you.
Hey, Dad.
Huh?
When?
Family. Isn't it about time? From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.